You really think a waitress can fix 12 dead cars? Victor Langford's voice rolled across the rain-soaked lot as laughter erupted behind him, sharp and careless beneath the glow of camera phones and flashing live stream comments. Thunder cracked somewhere beyond the dark Texas highway while 12 rusted vehicles sat lined up outside Naomi Brooks's tiny garage like abandoned corpses dragged in from another lifetime. Oil shimmered in the puddles beneath their tires. A neon open sign flickered weakly through the storm, buzzing above the crooked doorway of Brooks Auto Repair, the smallest mechanic shop on the edge of Arlington County. Naomi stood under the metal awning in her faded gray work shirt, rainwater dripping from the ends of her braids, one grease-stained hand wrapped around a wrench while the other rested silently at her side. She didn't answer him right away. She simply looked past the billionaire's polished boots toward the convoy of wrecked machines blocking her entire lot. A red Corvette with a shattered transmission, 2 pickups with seized engines, a Mustang missing half its electrical system, 12 impossible problems, 12 public humiliations. Victor smiled wider when she stayed quiet. He was tall, silver-haired, wrapped in a camel cashmere coat untouched by rain while expensive watches flashed beneath the floodlights of the tow trucks. Millions of followers watched his live stream every week, because rich men mocking ordinary people had somehow become entertainment in America. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced dramatically to the camera in his hand, welcome to the saddest little repair shop in Texas. More laughter exploded from the men standing behind him. One nearly dropped his cigar. Another zoomed his phone directly at Naomi's face. Comments raced across Victor's livestream screen. She can't fix those. This place looks haunted. Somebody save that girl. Naomi ignored all of it. The rain tapped steadily against the tin roof overhead, while the smell of wet asphalt and burnt transmission fluid thickened the air around her. Inside the garage, an old radio hummed low beside stacks of dusty tools that had once belonged to her father. Most nights she spent serving coffee and burgers at Rosie's Diner until midnight before coming here alone to keep the lights on with repair jobs nobody else wanted. She was tired down to the bone. 3 months behind on payments. One missed electric bill away from losing everything. Victor stepped closer, grinning like a man certain he already owned the ending. Tell you what, he said. If you somehow fix every one of these junkers, I'll personally feature your shop on every dealership page I own. His friends smirked. And if I can't? Naomi finally asked softly. Victor tilted his head. Then maybe this town stops pretending this place is a real garage. Silence settled beneath the storm. Naomi looked at the row of dead vehicles again. Then her eyes stopped on the final car being unloaded from the last tow truck. A faded midnight blue 1967 Chevrolet Impala. Rust clung to the wheel wells. One headlight hung broken. But the second she saw the cracked leather steering wheel through the rain-streaked windshield, something changed in her expression. Her breathing slowed. The laughter around her faded into the storm. Slowly, Naomi stepped toward the car as water splashed beneath her boots. Her fingers touched the cold metal near the driver's door where a tiny carved symbol still remained beneath years of chipped paint. A small crown. Her father's mark. The same mark he stamped onto every engine he rebuilt before he died. Victor kept talking to the live stream, unaware Naomi wasn't listening anymore. Because standing in the rain beside that ruined Chevy, staring at the symbol her father left behind nearly 15 years earlier, Naomi realized this was never just a joke. The rain finally stopped sometime after midnight, but the smell of wet metal and gasoline still clung to the garage walls like smoke. Naomi sat alone on an overturned paint bucket beside the old blue Impala, while a single fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Outside, the 12 broken cars rested silently beneath the pale orange glow of the parking lot lamps, their dented frames casting long shadows across the soaked concrete. Her diner apron still hung from a hook near the door, stained with coffee and pie. Filling from the double shift she had finished only hours earlier, yet sleep felt impossible now. Slowly, she reached into the glove compartment of the Impala with grease-stained fingers and froze when she found a faded service receipt folded beneath a rusted flashlight. The paper trembled slightly in her hand. Brooks Auto Repair. June 14, 2009. Customer. Langford Luxury Motor Group. Naomi stared at the signature at the bottom of the page. Her father's handwriting. Clean. Sharp. Familiar enough to tighten her chest instantly. She had not seen it in almost 15 years. The old radio crackled softly beside her, playing low country music through static while thunder rolled far away beyond the Texas plains. Her father used to keep that same radio beside him every night while rebuilding engines long after midnight. Naomi could still remember falling asleep in the office chair as a little girl while sparks flashed beneath lifted trucks and old rock songs echoed through the garage. A good mechanic listens before touching anything, he always told her. Cars talk. Most people just do not slow down enough to hear them. Naomi swallowed hard and looked around the tiny shop that barely survived month to month now. Half the ceiling leaked during storms. The paint peeled near the office windows. 3 tool drawers no longer opened properly, but every inch of the place still carried him somehow. His coffee mug remained beside the parts shelf. His old jacket still hung in the back room untouched. Even after all these years, Naomi could never bring herself to throw anything away. Suddenly headlights swept across the garage windows. A dusty tow truck slowed near the curb before stopping beside the lot. An older white man climbed out slowly, adjusting the hood of his rain jacket against the cold wind. Naomi recognized him immediately. Earl Dawson, one of the last mechanics who used to work beside her father before Brooks Auto Repair collapsed. Earl stared at the line of wrecked vehicles and let out a long whistle beneath his breath. Lord have mercy, he muttered. Victor Langford finally found your shop. Naomi folded the service receipt carefully. You know him. Earl gave a tired laugh without humor. Everybody in Texas knows Victor Langford. He stepped closer to the Impala, and the second he saw the small crown carved beneath the paint near the driver's door, his expression changed completely. The old mechanic removed his cap slowly. I have not seen that mark in years, he whispered. Naomi looked up sharply. This was my father's car, was it not? Earl stayed quiet for a moment too long. Wind rattled the loose garage sign overhead. Somewhere down the highway, a train horn echoed through the darkness. Finally Earl nodded once. Your daddy rebuilt that engine by hand, he said softly. Best work I ever saw. Naomi tightened her grip on the receipt. Then why was it sitting in Victor Langford's junk pile? Earl looked toward the distant glow of the city before answering. Because some men get rich building empires, he said carefully. And some men get rich taking credit for other people who built them first. Naomi felt the air inside the garage suddenly grow colder. Earl stepped closer, lowering his voice. Listen to me carefully, Naomi. Victor did not dump these cars here for laughs. The fluorescent light flickered overhead. Then why did he? She asked quietly. Earl looked directly at the old Impala beside her. Because your father did not lose this garage by accident. By sunrise the storm clouds had drifted west, leaving the Texas sky washed pale silver above the garage lot. But Naomi had not slept for even a minute. The old blue Impala still sat in the center bay with its hood raised while scattered tools surrounded her boots like pieces of a puzzle nobody else wanted to solve. A small shop fan rattled in the corner beside shelves lined with rusted carburetors and cracked headlights. Coffee burned in a chipped mug near the workbench, untouched and cold. Naomi slid beneath the Impala once more. Flashlight clenched between her teeth while her fingers traced the underside of the transmission housing. Something felt wrong. Not broken. Deliberate. She rolled back out slowly, grease streaked across her cheek, then climbed into the driver's seat and stared at the dashboard in silence. Outside, 18-wheelers groaned down the highway while morning radio hosts laughed about Victor Langford's livestream challenge. 12 dead cars and 1 waitress mechanic. One man joked through static. I am giving her 3 days before she quits crying and calls a tow truck. Laughter filled the speakers. Naomi switched the radio off immediately. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She had heard worse before. People laughed at her when she started rebuilding engines after her father died. They laughed when she worked mornings at the diner and nights at the garage. They laughed every time another repair shop opened nearby with brighter lights and newer equipment. But every month Brooks Auto Repair survived anyway. Barely. Quietly. Like an old engine refusing to stop running. Naomi reached into the glove compartment again and unfolded the faded service receipt beside another stack of papers she had discovered hidden beneath the seat. Most were old invoices tied to Langford Luxury Motor Group, but one photograph slipped loose onto her lap. Her breath caught instantly. The picture showed her father standing beside a younger Victor Langford nearly 20 years earlier. Both men smiled in front of a race car engine mounted inside this exact Impala. Across the bottom, someone had written in black marker, "Prototype Crown V8. Property of Elijah Brooks." Naomi stared at the words while the garage suddenly felt too small around her. Her father never talked about Victor Langford. Not once. Yet here they stood together smiling like business partners. Before she could think further, tires crunched outside the shop. Naomi looked up as a lifted pickup rolled into the lot followed by two teenagers carrying phones already recording. A local delivery driver climbed out holding breakfast tacos and grinned toward her. "You are internet famous now," he laughed. "Half this county is betting against you." Naomi ignored the camera pointed at her face and walked back toward the Impala. One of the boys zoomed in on the old car. "That thing is never running again," he said. "Victor Langford probably pulled it out of a junkyard." Naomi paused beside the open hood. Then quietly, without looking at them, she turned the ignition key once. The starter clicked weakly. Again. Another click. The teenagers smirked. One whispered something into his live stream. Naomi closed her eyes briefly and listened. Her father's voice echoed faintly in memory. "Cars talk. Most people just do not slow down enough to hear them." Suddenly her eyes opened. Naomi reached beneath the dashboard and pulled away a loose wire hidden deep behind the ignition housing. The second she exposed it, her expression changed. It had been sliced cleanly. Not worn. Not accidental. Intentional sabotage. Naomi stared at the cut wire in silence while cold air drifted through the garage bay. Then slowly she twisted the connection back together with steady fingers and turned the key one final time. The engine roared alive so violently the teenagers nearly dropped their phones. Deep thunder rolled through the garage as smoke burst from the exhaust pipes, and the old Impala shook beneath her hands like a waking animal. Outside, people across the livestream comments exploded in disbelief. Naomi sat motionless behind the wheel, staring at the dashboard while the engine growled perfectly beneath her. Then she looked down at the photograph again and whispered softly to herself, "What did they do to you, Dad?" The sound of the Impala's engine spread through the county faster than the storm had the night before. By noon, trucks lined both sides of the road outside Brooks Auto Repair while strangers gathered behind the chain-link fence holding phones high in the humid Texas heat. Some came to laugh again. Others came because they wanted proof that the Waitress mechanic had somehow brought a dead car back to life. Naomi barely noticed any of them. She was already underneath the second vehicle, sweat shining along her forehead while the metallic scent of oil and hot rubber thickened the garage air. The fan overhead squealed every few seconds like it might collapse at any moment. Her knuckles ached. Her back burned. But for the first time in years the garage no longer felt empty. It felt awake. Earl Dawson leaned against the office doorway sipping gas station coffee while watching her work in silence. "You know what scares rich men the most?" he asked eventually. Naomi slid herself out from beneath the truck and wiped her hands with an old rag. "What?" Earl nodded toward the crowd outside. Proof they were wrong. Before Naomi could answer, a black Escalade rolled slowly into the lot. The crowd immediately shifted. Phones rose higher. The engine purred quietly before the driver door opened and Victor Langford stepped out wearing dark sunglasses and a pressed navy suit despite the 100-degree afternoon heat. The smug confidence from the livestream was still there, but smaller now. Tighter around the edges. He removed his sunglasses slowly as his eyes locked onto the blue Impala idling perfectly near the garage entrance. For several seconds he said absolutely nothing. Naomi stood across from him in grease-stained coveralls with her sleeves rolled to her elbows. The contrast between them looked almost unreal. One built from polished wealth. The other from exhaustion and stubborn survival. Victor walked toward the Impala slowly, his expensive shoes crunching across loose gravel. He rested one hand against the hood and felt the vibration of the running engine beneath the metal. "Interesting," he murmured quietly. Naomi crossed her arms. "Funny thing about old machines," she said calmly. "They usually work if nobody sabotages them first." Victor looked at her sharply. Behind him, several people exchanged whispers. Earl lowered his coffee cup without blinking. Victor forced a smile. "You are accusing me of something?" Naomi reached into her pocket and tossed the sliced ignition wire onto the hood beside his hand. I am saying somebody wanted this car dead. Victor stared at the wire for one brief second too long. It was small, barely noticeable, but Naomi caught it. So did Earl. The billionaire recovered quickly, sliding his sunglasses back on. Maybe your father should have taught you not to chase ghosts, he said lightly. Naomi's expression hardened instantly. You knew my father. Victor adjusted the cuff of his suit. I knew a lot of mechanics. You built Langford Luxury with his engines. Silence swept across the lot. Even the nearby traffic seemed quieter for a moment. Victor finally smiled again, but this time there was no humor in it. Careful, he said softly. People love rooting for underdogs until underdogs become inconvenient. Naomi stepped closer now, her voice low and steady. My father lost this garage after working for you. Then somehow his car ends up hidden in your junk pile with his name attached to your company. Victor held her stare. Business is not personal. Naomi looked toward the running Impala beside them. For people with money, maybe. Wind rattled the old garage sign overhead, while cameras continued recording every second. Victor glanced briefly toward the crowd before leaning slightly closer to Naomi. You really think fixing one engine changes anything? Naomi did not flinch. No, she answered quietly. But the truth usually starts with one thing people were not supposed to notice. Victor stared at her another second before turning away. Yet as he walked back toward the Escalade, he glanced once more at the old blue Impala with an expression Naomi had not seen before. Not amusement. Not arrogance. Something colder. Something uncertain. By the end of the week, the garage no longer sounded like a dying business. It sounded alive. Air compressors hissed from sunrise until midnight. Wrenches clanged against concrete floors. Old engines coughed, rattled, then roared back to life beneath Naomi's hands one after another while crowds gathered daily outside Brooks Auto Repair just to watch what happened next. Every local news station in Arlington County had started calling her the Waitress mechanic, though Naomi hated the nickname more every time she heard it. To everyone else, the story looked inspiring. A struggling black waitress proving a billionaire wrong. But Naomi knew something deeper sat underneath all of it now. Every repaired engine uncovered another thread connected to her father. Another invoice. Another missing piece. Another silence nobody wanted explained. The old blue Impala remained parked inside the center bay untouched after dark, almost like the garage itself revolved around it now. Naomi spent every free moment searching through hidden compartments, faded paperwork, and old service records connected to Langford Luxury Motor Group. She barely slept. Some nights she forgot to eat entirely. Yet exhaustion no longer scared her. What scared her was the feeling that somebody had spent years burying the truth inside broken machines. One humid evening just after closing, Naomi climbed onto the roof of the garage carrying 2 sodas while the last orange sunlight faded behind the highway. Earl Dawson already sat there in an old folding chair watching traffic drift endlessly through the Texas dusk. You ever wonder why your father never fought back? He asked quietly as Naomi sat beside him. She opened the soda can slowly. Every day. Earl nodded toward the garage below them. Elijah Brooks was the best mechanic I ever knew. But your daddy trusted talent more than business. Victor trusted business more than people. Naomi stared down at the flickering neon sign below. What happened between them? Earl stayed silent long enough for crickets to fill the air around them. Then finally he spoke. Your father built a prototype engine years ago. Faster. Cleaner. Smarter than anything dealerships had back then. Victor saw dollar signs immediately. Naomi looked over sharply. The Crown V8. Earl's eyes narrowed slightly. So you found the photo? Naomi nodded once. Earl leaned back heavily in the chair. After that engine was finished, Victor's company exploded. New investors. New contracts. New dealerships across Texas. And my father? Earl looked away toward the highway lights. Your father lost everything within 2 years. Naomi felt her stomach tighten. That is impossible. Not if somebody controls the banks. Wind moved softly across the rooftop carrying the scent of gasoline and distant barbecue smoke from downtown. Naomi lowered her eyes toward the garage office window glowing below them. Why are you telling me this now? Earl gave a tired laugh. Because Victor Langford only revisits old ghosts when he is afraid one might still be alive. Before Naomi could answer, headlights suddenly swept across the lot below. A black Escalade rolled slowly beside the garage and stopped near the fence. Victor stepped out alone this time without cameras or live streams or laughing friends. He looked up toward the roof immediately as though he already knew she would be there. Naomi remained seated while Victor walked toward the building below them. "I think we should make this interesting," he called upward calmly. Earl muttered something under his breath and stood slowly. Naomi climbed down the metal ladder alone. The night air felt heavy and electric as she approached Victor beneath the buzzing neon sign. He handed her a folded contract without speaking. Naomi opened it carefully while passing headlights streaked across the paper. 30 days. Repair every vehicle successfully and Brooks Auto Repair receives a full restoration investment funded personally by Victor Langford. Fail even one car and ownership of the garage transfers permanently to Langford Luxury Motor Group. Naomi looked up slowly. "You are trying to buy this place." Victor's expression barely moved. "I am giving you a chance to save it." Naomi folded the contract carefully in half. "Why this garage?" Victor glanced briefly toward the old blue Impala visible through the shop window. Just for a second, something unsettled crossed his face before disappearing again. "Because some properties are worth more than people realize." Naomi stared at him in silence. Then slowly she signed the contract. The days that followed blurred together beneath heat, grease, and exhaustion until Naomi could barely remember what silence sounded like anymore. Brooks Auto Repair stayed lit long after every other business on the road went dark, its flickering neon sign glowing against the empty Texas highway like a stubborn heartbeat refusing to quit. Inside, the garage felt trapped between two worlds now. One built from rusted metal and old dreams. The other from cameras, contracts, and pressure heavy enough to crush people. Every morning strangers gathered outside before sunrise carrying coffee cups and phones, waiting to see whether the waitress mechanic would survive another day against Victor Langford's impossible challenge. Naomi ignored all of them. She moved from engine to engine with oil streaked across her arms and bruised exhaustion beneath her eyes while old country songs crackled softly from the radio beside her father's workbench. Sometimes she forgot whether it was 3 in the afternoon or 3 in the morning. Time became measured only by repaired transmissions, drained batteries, and bolts tightened beneath trembling hands. 8 cars remained, then 6, then 4. The old garage floor stayed littered with parts, empty coffee cups, and handwritten notes covered in her father's familiar formulas. Naomi had started finding hidden markings inside several engines now. Tiny carved crowns beneath panels nobody normally opened. Her father's symbol again. It was everywhere. Almost like he knew someone would eventually come looking. One humid night close to midnight, Naomi sat alone beneath the raised hood of a silver Mustang while rain tapped softly against the roof above her. This car was different. Meaner somehow. She had rebuilt the ignition system twice already. Replaced the fuel pump. Rewired half the electrical harness. Nothing worked. The engine still died every time she turned the key. Frustration finally cracked through her calm. Naomi slammed the wrench onto the workbench hard enough to make tools rattle across the garage. "Talk to me," she whispered angrily toward the silent engine. Her father's old radio hummed low nearby. Cars talk. Most people just do not slow down enough to hear them. Naomi closed her eyes. Breathed once. Then she listened. Not to the engine. To the silence around it. Slowly she reached beneath the dashboard and paused. There. Hidden behind the fuse box. A second wiring system that did not belong there. Professional. Clean. Deliberate. Somebody had built a kill switch directly into the car itself. Naomi stared at it while cold realization settled heavily into her chest. These cars were not naturally broken. Somebody designed them to fail. The garage office door creaked suddenly behind her. Naomi spun around sharply to see Victor Langford standing silently near the entrance wearing a charcoal coat despite the heat outside. Rainwater shimmered faintly across his shoulders beneath the fluorescent lights. Naomi frowned immediately. "You planning to livestream this too?" Victor ignored the comment. Entirely. His eyes stayed fixed on the Mustang. "You found it," he said quietly. Naomi straightened slowly. "You knew." Victor walked closer through the dim garage without answering right away. The smell of rain drifted in behind him. Those systems were experimental security modifications, he finally said. Only 3 engineers ever understood how they worked. Naomi crossed her arms. My father was one of them. Victor's silence confirmed everything. Naomi stared at him in disbelief. You sabotaged your own cars. No, Victor replied calmly. Somebody else did. Naomi laughed once without humor. And you expect me to believe that? Victor looked around the garage slowly. At the old tools. The cracked office window. The faded photographs hanging beside the workbench. Something softened briefly in his expression before disappearing again. Your father built things people wanted, he said quietly. That made him dangerous. Naomi felt anger rise sharply inside her. You let him lose everything. Victor looked directly at her now. Tired. Older somehow beneath the harsh lights. You think I am the villain because that is easier than understanding what really happened. Naomi stepped closer. Then explain it. Victor glanced toward the old blue Impala sitting silently in the center bay. For the first time since this challenge began, his confidence seemed gone entirely. Your father discovered something inside Langford Luxury before he died, he said softly. And if you keep rebuilding these cars, you are going to discover it too. Then without another word, Victor turned and disappeared back into the rain. Naomi did not sleep after Victor left the garage. She stayed there through the entire night surrounded by humming fluorescent lights and half-dismantled engines while rainwater crawled slowly down the office windows. The clock above the workbench ticked past 2 in the morning. Then 4. Then 6. Outside, the highway never stopped moving. 18-wheelers thundered through the darkness while Brooks Auto Repair glowed alone beside the road like the last stubborn place in America refusing to disappear. 3 cars remained unfinished now. Only 3. But the deeper Naomi dug into them, the stranger everything became. Every vehicle carried hidden modifications tied directly to Langford Luxury Motor Group. Secret kill systems. Altered wiring. Experimental parts never released publicly. And every single system traced back to one name written quietly across old engineering notes she kept uncovering inside the blue Impala. Elijah Brooks. Her father had not simply repaired engines for Victor Langford. He had built something for him. Something powerful enough that people still wanted buried years later. Naomi sat at the workbench holding one of the old documents beneath a desk lamp while grease-stained papers covered the table around her. Patent sketches. Performance calculations. Fuel efficiency tests. At the bottom corner of nearly every page sat her father's tiny carved crown symbol. She stared at the handwriting until her vision blurred from exhaustion. Then suddenly another page slipped loose from the folder and landed on the floor beside her boots. It was not an engine diagram. It was a bank statement. Brooks Auto Repair. Outstanding debt transferred to Langford Holdings. Naomi froze completely. Her father's debt had not gone to a bank after all. It had gone directly to Victor's company. The office door burst open before she could process the thought further. Earl Dawson hurried inside breathing hard, his baseball cap soaked from the humid morning air. Naomi, he said sharply, you need to see this. He handed her his phone. A live stream filled the screen immediately. Victor stood inside a massive dealership showroom surrounded by reporters and polished luxury vehicles beneath bright white lights. Naomi turned the volume higher. While I admire determination, Victor said calmly into the microphones, business still requires reality. Brooks Auto Repair has less than 2 weeks left to fulfill our agreement, and unfortunately one of the remaining vehicles suffered catastrophic electrical damage overnight. Naomi's stomach dropped instantly. She sprinted toward the garage bays before Earl could stop her. The smell hit first. Burnt wiring. Melted plastic. Smoke still lingering in the humid air. Naomi froze in the center of the garage staring at the silver Mustang she repaired only hours earlier. The dashboard sat dark now. Electrical cables hung lifeless beneath the steering column. Someone had destroyed the entire system. Earl swore quietly behind her. Naomi walked slowly toward the car in disbelief. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Her hand shook as she climbed into the driver's seat and turned the ignition. Nothing. Complete silence. Outside, Cameras had already started gathering near the lot again after Victor's livestream announcement. Naomi stared through the windshield while panic clawed slowly at her chest for the first time since this challenge began. If the Mustang stayed dead, she lost everything. The garage. Her father's legacy. All of it. Earl knelt beside the open driver door and lowered his voice carefully. Somebody came here after closing. Naomi clenched the steering wheel tightly. Victor. Earl hesitated. Maybe. Naomi's eyes narrowed sharply. You do not believe that. Earl stayed silent. The old mechanic looked more tired than she had ever seen him. Finally he spoke quietly. Victor may be rich enough to bury people in paperwork, but he does not sabotage his own machines. Naomi looked over slowly. Then who does? Before Earl could answer, a black sedan pulled into the lot outside. A tall man stepped out wearing a pressed gray suit Naomi had never seen before. He carried a leather briefcase beneath one arm and moved with the calm confidence of somebody used to expensive rooms. The man stopped just inside the garage entrance and glanced toward the damaged Mustang. Miss Brooks, he said quietly. My name is Daniel Mercer. I used to work for Victor Langford. Naomi stepped out of the car carefully. Used to. Daniel nodded once. Your father trusted me before he died. Silence filled the garage. Even the highway outside seemed distant suddenly. Daniel slowly opened the briefcase in his hands. Inside sat a stack of sealed files and one small cassette tape labeled only with 2 handwritten words. Crown Project. Naomi stared at the tape while cold air drifted through the open garage bay. Then Daniel looked directly at her and said the one thing she never expected to hear. Victor Langford did not destroy your father, he said softly. He spent 15 years trying to protect what your father discovered. The garage felt impossibly quiet after Daniel Mercer spoke those words. Naomi stood frozen beside the damaged Mustang, while the fluorescent lights hummed overhead and morning heat drifted slowly through the open garage bay. Outside, reporters still gathered near the fence waiting for another public collapse. But inside Brooks Auto Repair the air suddenly felt heavier than engines or contracts or money. Daniel placed the cassette tape carefully onto the workbench beside Elijah Brooks's old radio. Your father recorded this 3 weeks before he died, he said softly. Naomi stared at the faded label while her heartbeat pounded inside her ears. Crown Project. Earl Dawson removed his cap slowly and looked away toward the highway. I told him not to keep digging, Earl muttered quietly. Daniel nodded once. Elijah believed people deserved the truth. Naomi finally found her voice. Truth about what? Daniel reached into the briefcase again and slid several engineering documents across the workbench. Patent transfers. Internal dealership memos. Confidential testing reports tied directly to Langford Luxury Motor Group. Naomi's eyes moved quickly over the pages until one sentence stopped her cold. Unauthorized engine failures linked to Crown prototype systems. Multiple incidents concealed to avoid federal investigation. Naomi looked up sharply. Daniel's expression darkened. Your father discovered that one of Victor's senior executives altered the Crown systems years ago to force dealerships into expensive replacement contracts. Engines were designed to fail early without customers realizing why. Naomi's stomach tightened. People paid for repairs that were intentional. Daniel nodded slowly. Billions of dollars over 15 years. Earl swore under his breath. Naomi looked toward the damaged Mustang again and suddenly everything made sense. The sabotage, the hidden kill switches, the broken systems inside every car Victor delivered to her garage. Somebody had spent years burying evidence inside damaged engines. Victor knew. Naomi asked quietly. Daniel hesitated before answering. Victor discovered it too late. By then investors, board members, and executives were all tied into the profits. Naomi laughed bitterly. So he protected them. No, Daniel replied immediately. He protected your father. Silence settled heavily across the garage. Daniel looked directly at Naomi. Elijah refused to stay quiet after discovering the truth. Victor tried paying him to disappear. Your father refused. Then the board moved against both of them. Naomi felt anger and confusion twisting together inside her chest. My father lost everything. Because Victor transferred the debt into Langford Holdings himself, Daniel explained softly. It was the only way to stop the board from taking this garage permanently. Naomi stared at him in disbelief. Why would he care? Daniel glanced toward the old blue Impala resting silently in the center bay. Because your father saved Victor Langford's company before any dealership ever existed. And because despite everything, Victor considered Elijah Brooks his friend. The garage fell silent except for the soft buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. Naomi looked down at the cassette tape again while emotion tightened painfully in her throat. For years she believed Victor Langford destroyed her father out of greed. But now the story beneath the story kept shifting beneath her feet like unstable ground. Suddenly the office lights flickered once. Then twice. Earl frowned immediately. That is not good. Before Naomi could react, the entire garage went dark. Every machine died instantly. Fans stopped spinning. Neon lights outside vanished. The garage plunged into heavy silence broken only by distant traffic and scattered voices from the crowd outside. Naomi grabbed a flashlight quickly while Daniel moved toward the breaker panel near the office. Seconds later he stopped cold. The main lines were cut, he said sharply. Naomi's chest tightened. What? Earl rushed beside him with the flashlight beam. Thick electrical cables hung severed beside the breaker box. Fresh. Clean. Deliberate. Outside, thunder rolled low across the Texas sky again while people near the fence started murmuring in confusion. Naomi looked toward the unfinished cars sitting silently in darkness. Only 48 hours remained before the contract deadline. Without power, the lifts would not run. The compressors would not work. Half the equipment inside the garage was useless. Earl slammed one hand against the wall in frustration. Whoever did this knew exactly when to strike. Naomi stood completely still in the darkened garage while rain began tapping softly against the roof once more. Then slowly headlights appeared outside the lot one after another. Pickup trucks. Tow rigs. Old work vans. Dozens of them. Earl squinted toward the road in confusion. The first truck stopped beside the garage and an older mechanic stepped out carrying a portable generator across his shoulders. Behind him came another. Then another. Men and women Naomi recognized from repair shops all across Arlington County climbed out silently carrying tools, cables, fuel tanks, and floodlights beneath the rain. One gray-haired mechanic looked toward Naomi and shrugged. Your daddy fixed my truck for free back in '98, he said. Figured it was time somebody returned the favor. Then all across the dark garage lot, generators roared to life. Rain hammered the roof of Brooks Auto Repair through the entire final night like the sky itself refused to sleep beside them. Portable floodlights cast long white beams across the garage while generators roared outside beneath rows of soaked pickup trucks and crowded toolboxes. Mechanics from across Arlington County moved through the bays together without speaking much, their grease-stained hands passing wrenches, cables, and engine parts through the humid midnight air like a language older than money. Naomi stood in the center of it all beside the final unfinished car. Exhaustion carved deep beneath her eyes but something steadier burning underneath now. Hope. For the first time since her father died, she no longer felt alone inside this garage. Earl Dawson worked silently near the electrical panel restoring damaged lines, while Daniel Mercer organized stacks of documents and old Crown project files across the office desk. Every few minutes another mechanic arrived carrying coffee or spare parts or fuel for the generators. Nobody asked for payment. Nobody asked for cameras. They simply came because years earlier Elijah Brooks had once helped them when nobody else would. The storm outside grew heavier near dawn. Thunder rattled the loose garage windows while Naomi tightened the final bolts beneath the hood of the silver Mustang with trembling fingers. Her muscles screamed from exhaustion. Grease covered her arms nearly to the elbows. The old radio beside her father's workbench crackled softly through static before an old blues song drifted into the garage. Naomi froze for half a second listening to it. Her father used to hum that exact song while rebuilding engines after midnight. The memory nearly broke her. But she kept working anyway. Outside the lot had become packed with people despite the weather. News vans lined the road. Cameras flashed beneath umbrellas. Live streams counted down the final minutes of Victor Langford's challenge, while social media exploded with arguments about whether Brooks Auto Repair would survive the sunrise. Then at exactly 6:43 in the morning, the storm finally began to weaken. Pale orange light spread slowly across the horizon behind the highway, while the generators continued rumbling steadily beneath the fading rain. Naomi wiped her hands with an old rag and stared at the Mustang in silence. The final car. The final test. Earl walked beside her quietly. "Ready?" he asked softly. Naomi looked around the garage first. At the mechanics who stayed all night. At Daniel standing beside the office window holding the Crown Project files. At the old blue Impala resting silently in the center bay beneath her father's crown symbol. Then Naomi climbed into the driver's seat. Outside, the crowd pressed closer against the fence. Cameras lifted higher. Somewhere across the lot, a black Escalade rolled slowly into view. Victor Langford stepped out alone beneath the clearing sky and stood silently watching the garage. No live stream. No reporters beside him. Just quiet. Naomi wrapped her hand around the ignition key while her heartbeat thundered inside her. Chest louder than the storm ever had. Then she turned it. For one terrible second nothing happened. The crowd outside went silent. Naomi closed her eyes briefly. Then suddenly the engine roared alive so hard the entire garage shook beneath the sound. Cheers exploded across the lot instantly. Mechanics slapped each other on the shoulders. Reporters shouted into cameras. Floodlights reflected off puddles while the silver Mustang rumbled perfectly beneath Naomi's hands. Earl laughed openly for the first time in years. Daniel lowered his head quietly in relief. And across the lot Victor Langford simply stood there motionless beneath the morning light staring at the sound of an engine everybody else thought was dead. Naomi stepped out of the car slowly while cheers still echoed around her. Victor walked toward her through the wet gravel until they stood face to face beneath the buzzing neon sign one final time. Neither spoke at first. The contract deadline clock on every live stream hit 0 behind them. Naomi handed Victor the signed inspection sheet calmly. "All 12, she said softly. Victor looked down at the paper for several long seconds before folding it carefully in half. Then finally he looked at her again with something unfamiliar in his eyes. Not arrogance. Not pity. Respect. "Your father would have been proud of you," he said quietly. Naomi swallowed hard but kept her voice steady. "You should have told me the truth years ago." Victor glanced toward the garage. Some truths cost people everything. Naomi shook her head slowly. "No. Silence does." Wind moved softly across the lot, while the sunrise reflected against rows of repaired engines behind her. Victor reached into his coat pocket and placed a small brass key onto Naomi's palm. Langford Executive Dealership. Downtown Arlington. Naomi frowned in confusion. Victor gave a tired smile that looked older than wealth itself. "The board forced me out last night after Daniel released the Crown files to federal investigators," he said quietly. "The company is finished." Naomi stared at him silently. Victor looked once more toward Brooks Auto Repair glowing beneath the sunrise. But maybe something better. Deserves to survive instead. Then the billionaire turned and walked away through the fading storm while behind Naomi, the old garage doors rolled open wide to the morning light.